What if I told you that there is one verse, a single ayah that can end every fear, silence every worry, and dissolve every problem that ever chained your heart? Ibn Arabi said, "The moment the servant truly knows his Lord, the weight of the world vanishes." There exists a verse that carries this knowing, a verse where Allah Himself gives the solution to every burden, and whoever puts his trust in Allah, He is sufficient for him. At-Talaq 65. This isn't poetry, it's a spiritual law. Every test, every heartbreak, every delay, all find their cure in this one truth. The only question is, do you trust Him enough to let go? The verse that holds the key. Whoever trusts Allah. When Ibn Arabi spoke of trust, he wasn't describing a passive state, he meant a living connection between the soul and its source. Trust is not laziness, it is surrender after effort. It is when your heart says, "I have done all I can, and now I hand the outcome to the one who controls outcomes." The verse, "Whoever puts his trust in Allah, He is sufficient for him," is not merely comfort, it's a divine law. It means your sufficiency doesn't come from what you hold, but from who holds you. Imagine a man walking through a storm with no shelter. Every drop that hits him feels like despair, until he realizes the rain itself is guided, every drop falls by decree. That realization turns his fear into peace. This is the power of Tawakkul, when you stop fighting life's flow and recognize Allah's wisdom in every event. Ibn Arabi said, "The servant who truly trusts sees every loss as a messenger of gain." That's not theory, it's freedom. People often mistake trust for recklessness, but trust begins after effort, not before it. A farmer still plants the seed, waters the soil, protects his crops, yet he knows that only Allah commands the rain. The Sufi sees this balance as perfection, effort from the body, reliance from the soul. The world calls it surrender, the Noah calls it clarity, because when Allah becomes your guarantee, worry loses its throne. One of Ibn Arabi's students once asked, "How can I trust when my life keeps falling apart?" He replied, "You don't trust so life stops falling apart, you trust so your heart doesn't." This verse is not a promise that life will always go your way. It's a promise that Allah will carry you through it. When things collapse, it's not failure, it's Allah teaching your soul where real strength lives. There's a hidden sweetness in trusting Allah that logic can't taste. When the world rejects you, you begin to see that rejection as redirection. A door closes, but it's Allah's hand gently turning you towards something unseen. Ibn Arabi taught that the one who lives this verse walks lightly upon the earth, because his reliance no longer weighs on people, plans, or possessions. His heart depends only on the giver, never the gift. In moments of chaos, Tawakkul becomes the anchor. It doesn't remove the storm, it roots you so deeply that even the storm starts to look like mercy. When you trust Allah, you begin to read His silence as guidance and His delays as care. Ibn Arabi said, "The lover knows that every heartbreak hides the beloved's voice." That is the essence of this verse, certainty, that every path is still within His plan. Many people say they trust Allah, yet they panic when results don't match their desires. True trust begins where expectations end. When you stop trying to dictate how Allah should bless you, you start to witness blessings you never imagined. The heart that truly trusts doesn't complain about timing, it worships through waiting, because it knows that Allah's later is often His greatest gift. Ibn Arabi wrote that trust is not about believing Allah will do what you want, it's knowing He cannot do wrong by you. This is why Sufis walk with calm even when their world burns. They've tasted what it means to hand their story back to the author. If you lose a person, a dream, a home, it's not absence, it's adjustment. Allah is rearranging your life so your soul can breathe again. The world tells you to rely on yourself, but self-reliance is a fragile empire. One illness, one loss, one heartbreak, and it crumbles. Tawakkul rebuilds you on eternal ground. You stop measuring peace by what you control and start feeling it through who controls you. Ibn Arabi said, "Trust is the bridge between knowing Allah and living in peace. Every step across it dissolves fear into light." To live this verse is to walk through life with open hands, doing your best, but clinging to nothing. You pray, plan, and act, but your heart rests in the certainty that Allah never abandons those who rely on Him. And when your efforts don't bloom, your faith still does. For in trusting Him, you no longer chase outcomes, you walk with the one who creates them. That is sufficiency. That is peace. The illusion of control, why we suffer most, when we try to fix everything. We live in a world that worships control. People plan their days, their futures, even their emotions, believing that mastery over life will bring peace. But Ibn Arabi taught the opposite, that control is the greatest illusion of the ego. The moment you think you're steering your fate, life humbles you. You can't command the wind, only adjust your sail. The pain we feel isn't from what happens to us, but from our resistance to what Allah has already written. The illusion of control begins with fear, the fear of losing, of uncertainty, of being forgotten. So we grasp tighter, to people, to money, to outcomes. Yet the tighter we hold, the more life slips through our fingers. Ibn Arabi said, "The one who clings to creation is like the man trying to stop the tide with his hands." Every heartbreak, every loss, is Allah gently peeling away what we were never meant to own. When something breaks in our life, our first instinct is to fix it. We rush to patch the cracks, rewrite the story, force an ending that feels acceptable. But what if the cracks are sacred? What if the breaking is part of the design? The Sufi doesn't rush to fix what Allah has touched. He pauses, he breathes, he asks, "What is my Lord teaching me through this unraveling?" Because not everything broken is meant to be repaired. Some things are meant to reveal light through their fractures. We suffer most when we confuse control with responsibility. You are responsible for effort, not for the outcome. You are asked to plant the seed, not command the harvest. When you demand results on your timeline, you set yourself against divine timing, and that battle is one you can never win. Ibn Arabi wrote, "When you argue with destiny, you argue with the wisdom that loves you." Control feeds the ego. It makes us believe that our intelligence, our hustle, our networks are what sustain us. But control also breeds anxiety, because deep down, the soul knows it's a lie. You can't predict the next heartbeat, yet you believe you can control tomorrow. The Sufi laughs at this contradiction. He still works hard, but his heart works harder in surrender. That is why his peace is unshakable. Look around, the most anxious people are those who can't stop trying to fix everything. They replay conversations, manipulate outcomes, chase validation. But peace never comes through manipulation. It comes through submission. Ibn Arabi said, "The heart finds calm when it stops pretending to be the Lord." The moment you release the illusion of control, you stop drowning in what's not yours to carry. Control is a mirage that disappears the moment you reach it. You think you've got life figured out, and suddenly, an illness, a delay, a betrayal, and the illusion collapses. Allah doesn't destroy your plans to hurt you. He dismantles your illusion so you can finally see Him. Every unexpected turn is a divine correction, steering you back toward trust. The wise don't panic when plans fail, they whisper Alhamdulillah. In trying to control life, we often end up trying to control people, and that's where the deepest pain begins. We expect others to behave as we want, to love us as we imagine, to stay when their chapter in our life is complete. But hearts belong to Allah alone. When you force what He's trying to free you from, you imprison yourself. Ibn Arabi said, "Love controlled becomes suffering. Love surrendered becomes light." When you trust your plan more than Allah's plan, life will teach you humility. That job that didn't work out, that relationship that ended, those weren't punishments, they were protections. The universe, in Sufi language, is not chaotic. It is perfectly responsive. What breaks you today was designed to soften you for tomorrow. And when you stop trying to fix everything, you begin to see that nothing was ever broken, only realigned. The illusion of control blinds us to divine artistry. You can't see the full painting while standing too close to the canvas. Every confusion, every delay, every detour, these are brushstrokes you'll only understand when you step back. Ibn Arabi wrote, "Man sees fragments, Allah writes the whole." The more you trust the unseen pattern, the more peace replaces your need for answers. Sometimes, the need to fix everything is really a refusal to feel. You don't want to face your grief, so you fix others. You don't want to face uncertainty, so you overplan your life. But healing isn't found in control. It's found in surrendering to what hurts without resistance. When you finally stop fighting reality, you meet Allah in the silence between your efforts. That's where His mercy speaks the loudest. Every hardship is an invitation to release control. Allah doesn't want you to solve the storm, He wants you to find Him in it. The Prophet ﷺ said, "If you trust in Allah as He deserves, He will provide for you as He provides for the birds." The birds don't control the sky. They simply trust that it will hold them. Ibn Arabi's heart echoed this truth. The sky of trust is vast, and those who let go learn to fly. There's a point where the Sufi no longer prays for specific outcomes, he only prays for clarity and patience. Because when you let Allah choose for you, you never lose. The illusion of control dies when love for the divine deepens. You no longer fear what you can't predict. You no longer mourn what doesn't go your way. You begin to see that what left was mercy disguised, and what stayed was enough. When you surrender control, you don't lose power, you align with it. The entire universe runs on surrender. Rivers flow by yielding to gravity. Trees grow by bending toward light. Only man resists, and only man suffers for it. Ibn Arabi said, "The most rebellious act is trying to lead what was meant to follow. True strength is submission, true wisdom is humility. To fix everything is to distrust Allah's perfection. To let go is to trust His authorship. Life will still test you, but the one who has surrendered no longer flinches. He moves through storms with a quiet smile, because he knows the hand behind every wind. The illusion of control fades, and what remains is pure tawakkul, the peace of knowing that Allah was never out of control, only you were." The Sufi path of tawakkul. Trust as the highest form of knowledge. Tawakkul is not blind faith, it is seeing with the heart what the eyes cannot. Ibn Arabi said, "Knowledge ends where trust begins," meaning true understanding isn't in what you know, but in how deeply you rely. The Sufi doesn't claim to understand Allah's plan, he bows to it. Tawakkul is the moment knowledge turns into surrender, when intellect steps aside, and the soul whispers, "You are enough for me, my Lord." That is the beginning of divine intimacy. To walk the path of tawakkul is to walk light, unburdened by the illusion of control. You move, you strive, but your peace doesn't depend on outcomes. It's the difference between rowing endlessly and floating in the current of Allah's mercy. The world thinks surrender means weakness. The Sufi knows it's the purest strength, because only the one who trusts Allah fully can face the unknown with calm. Ibn Arabi taught that trust is not learned in comfort but carved through chaos. When everything collapses, plans, hopes, people, and yet the heart whispers, "Alhamdulillah," that is the secret gate to Marifa, true knowing. The intellect can memorize verses, but only the heart that trusts can taste them. The path of tawakkul transforms pain into awareness. Every heartbreak becomes a classroom of divine wisdom. The scholar may explain tawakkul, but the Sufi lives it. He watches the sun rise not because he expects it, but because he trusts the one who said, "Be." Knowledge without trust makes you proud. Trust without knowledge makes you lost. But when the two unite, you walk with certainty even in darkness. Ibn Arabi said, "He who trusts sees through the veil. He does not fear the unknown, for he knows who dwells within it." Trust is not passive surrender, it's active remembrance. Every breath, every delay, every unanswered prayer is a conversation between the Creator and the created. The one who trusts no longer begs for things to go his way. He prays to stay within Allah's way. When he loses, he smiles not from denial, but from recognition. The loss was the lesson. The delay was the direction. Tawakkul transforms every step into worship. You stop walking with anxiety and start walking with awareness. You work, but your heart remains still. You strive, but without fear. Because you know that results are not rewards, they're reflections of divine timing. Ibn Arabi said, "The one who trusts never measures mercy by what happens. He measures it by who is behind it." That is knowledge beyond intellect. When a person truly embraces tawakkul, their relationship with the world changes. They no longer chase guarantees. They walk with gratitude. They stop asking, "Why me?" and begin saying, "Teach me." Life no longer feels random, every test carries a hidden verse. Even heartbreak becomes sacred, because it drives the heart back to its true home. Trust is not escape from reality. It's seeing Allah in every reality. The seeker on the Sufi path learns that Tawakkul is the bridge between fear and faith. Each test stretches it, yet each crossing strengthens it. You begin to see that pain is not punishment, and waiting is not wasted time. Every delay is a divine arrangement preparing your soul for what it once rushed toward. The Sufi walks slowly because he knows haste belongs to those who doubt. True knowledge humbles you into surrender. The more you know Allah, the less you argue with His plan. The heart that trusts doesn't demand explanations. It bows in reverence. Ibn Arabi said, "To know is to trust is to rest." The knower finds peace not by controlling life, but by flowing with it, knowing that every wave carries him closer to the shore of divine wisdom. Even when surrounded by uncertainty, the one who trusts feels guided. It's not that life gets easier, it's that the heart gets anchored. The storms still come, but they no longer shake the foundation. Tawakkul isn't about getting what you want, it's about realizing you already have everything you need. Allah's presence, His timing, His care. That realization itself is the highest form of knowledge. The world teaches us to depend on logic, but the Sufi learns to depend on light, the light that descends when logic fails. Ibn Arabi said, "The intellect stops at the gate of the unseen, but trust walks through." The one who trusts no longer fears being misunderstood, because his faith is rooted in a deeper realm where proof is replaced by peace, and certainty comes not from sight, but surrender. Tawakkul purifies the heart from spiritual arrogance. When you stop believing your effort alone creates results, you begin to see Allah's hand in everything. The success, the setback, the silence. You no longer boast, "I achieved this," but whisper, "He allowed it." Knowledge without this humility becomes poison. Trust turns it into medicine. The Sufi doesn't say, "I know," he says, "I see." When Ibn Arabi wrote about Tawakkul, he wasn't describing theory, he was describing a state of being. A soul that trusts becomes transparent. Divine wisdom shines through it effortlessly. It no longer resists the will of Allah, it reflects it. Such a heart is not anxious about tomorrow, because it already lives in eternity in the certainty that what Allah chooses is always better than what it desires. The more a person walks this path, the quieter their prayers become. They stop asking for things and start asking for trust, because to trust is to know, and to know is to rest. Tawakkul turns knowledge into presence. It dissolves fear, pride, and impatience until only awareness of Allah remains. The Sufi calls that state yaqeen, unshakable certainty born from surrender. In the end, Tawakkul is not about expecting miracles, it is realizing that life itself is one. The beating of your heart, the rising of the sun, the unseen protection in every delay, all of it flows from Him. Trust, then, is not ignorance. It's the highest intelligence of the soul. When you trust fully, you don't just understand Allah, you know Him. And that knowing is peace beyond words. When delay is divine mercy, the hidden rhythm of Allah's timing. Delay is not denial, it is refinement. Ibn Arabi said, "Allah delays not to punish, but to perfect." What feels like waiting is often preparation. The heart, in its haste, demands results it cannot yet handle. But Allah, in His mercy, slows time so the soul can grow into the blessing it asks for. The Sufi understands this rhythm, that divine timing is not late, it is exact. To trust the delay is to honor the wisdom behind it. We beg for doors to open, unaware that what lies behind them might still destroy us. Allah holds them shut, not out of cruelty, but protection. He delays because He knows what the soul cannot see, that maturity must precede manifestation. Ibn Arabi wrote, "When the servant becomes ready, the answer descends as rain to a thirsty earth. Until then, waiting is worship, not punishment." The impatient heart mistakes silence for rejection. It cries, "Why not now?" But Allah's silence is never empty. It's full of unseen arrangements, invisible alignments, and quiet mercy. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Know that victory comes with patience." The Sufi adds, "And patience is proof of love." For to wait upon Allah is to trust that His care exceeds your imagination. Delay is the womb of wisdom. Inside it, unseen growth occurs. The believer doesn't see the roots spreading beneath the soil, so he assumes nothing is happening. But Allah is nurturing the unseen before He unveils the seen. Ibn Arabi said, "The delay of the gift is the polishing of the heart that will carry it. Every ungranted wish refines you into the vessel fit for divine trust." Sometimes Allah delays because He loves your voice in dua. He withholds the answer so you keep calling. So the bond between you and Him deepens beyond transaction into intimacy. The Sufi doesn't rush the answer, he treasures the connection. He knows that the prayer itself is the hidden gift, and the delay is the protection of that sacred nearness. When life slows you down, it's not always stagnation, it's synchronization. Allah is aligning your moment with countless unseen threads. One change in timing could alter your destiny entirely. The Sufi watches this with awe, not anxiety. He says, if it hasn't come yet, it's still being woven. To him, delay is not distance, it's design. The ego wants to move fast, the soul wants to move right. Delay humbles the ego so that the soul can lead. That's why divine timing often frustrates the impatient. It dismantles their illusion of control. Ibn Arabi wrote, "The beloved withholds to teach you dependence, then grants to teach you gratitude. Both states are mercy, both are part of the same rhythm. In the waiting, Allah reveals what truly owns your heart. Do you love Him for His gifts or for His presence? The one who only praises when things go right has not yet tasted faith. The one who praises during delay has already met Allah through surrender." The Sufi understands this. He no longer measures love by how fast prayers are answered, but by how deeply his heart stays at peace while waiting. Delay exposes attachment. It shows you where your faith ends and where fear begins. Every unfulfilled plan is a mirror showing what you still cling to. Allah delays to detach you from the temporary so you can receive the eternal. Ibn Arabi said, "When He delays, He is purifying your wanting until only He remains desired." That purification feels like pain, but it's mercy in disguise. Sometimes the blessing isn't in receiving what you asked for, it's in being protected from it. The relationship that didn't work, the dream that didn't unfold, the door that stayed closed, each is a form of divine editing. Allah removes what your ego wants to make room for what your soul needs. The Sufi smiles at this mystery, whispering, "He writes better than I plan." The one who truly trusts Allah's timing never loses peace. He knows that waiting isn't wasted time. It's sacred ground where faith matures. Even when others move ahead, he doesn't compare. He knows that rushing a flower doesn't make it bloom faster. It only tears the petals. Ibn Arabi said, "Each soul has its appointed sunrise. Forcing it brings only darkness." Delays also teach humility. They remind us that we are not the authors of our lives but the characters in a divine script. The Sufi accepts his role fully. He acts, prays, and strives, but never demands. His heart whispers, "Whenever you choose, my Lord is perfect." That acceptance becomes liberation. No clock can enslave the one whose faith rests outside of time. When you finally reach what you once begged for, you'll realize why it had to come later. You'll see how every disappointment was a redirection, every pause a protection. The Sufi reflects on such moments not with pride, but awe at how every delay carried the fingerprints of divine mercy. What once felt like withholding now feels like overwhelming love. Divine timing also humbles intellect. It shows that the universe doesn't obey our logic, it obeys Allah's wisdom. Sometimes a single day of delay saves you from a lifetime of regret. Sometimes the pain that lingers today prevents destruction tomorrow. Ibn Arabi said, "He who sees delay as loss has not yet known the generosity of time." What you call waiting, heaven calls alignment. In the end, waiting is not about enduring time, it's about trusting eternity. The Sufi walks slowly, with a smile that comes from knowing he's never late for what was written for him. The delay was never punishment. It was protection, preparation, purification, mercy dressed as time. To recognize that is to master the secret rhythm of existence. Allah is never late. The heart just needed to arrive first. From anxiety to alignment, the shift that changes everything. Anxiety begins when you try to control what was never yours. It is the tension between the mind's desire to predict and the soul's duty to trust. Ibn Arabi said, "The heart shakes when it forgets who holds it." The moment you stop resisting life and start aligning with it, peace returns. Alignment isn't escape, it's surrender with awareness. the quiet realization that everything unfolds by divine intelligence. When the ego leads, life becomes chaos. You plan, panic, and push against the natural flow, thinking control equals safety. But alignment is not found in fighting the current. It's found in floating with faith. The Sufi understands this subtle art to move with the rhythm of Allah's decree, not against it. Anxiety says, "What if?" Alignment says, "Even if." That shift changes everything. Anxiety thrives on attachment. You worry about outcomes because your identity depends on them. The job, the person, the reputation, each becomes a fragile pillar holding your peace. But the moment you anchor your heart in Allah, everything else loses the power to shake you. Ibn Arabi wrote, "The one who trusts stands in the storm as if in a garden." That is alignment, stillness within movement. The world glorifies productivity, but the soul glorifies presence. You think you're anxious because of pressure, but truly, it's disconnection. You've drifted too far from the remembrance of who provides. Alignment begins when dhikr replaces doubt, when your tongue whispers Subhanallah instead of what will happen. Anxiety melts. You stop chasing control and start witnessing divine care. Every worry is a doorway to remembrance. When you feel the heart racing, ask not, "How do I fix this?" but "What am I forgetting about Allah right now?" Anxiety fades when remembrance deepens. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Know that what missed you was never meant for you." The Sufi hears this and smiles because alignment isn't found in avoiding pain, but in accepting divine proportion. Ibn Arabi taught that anxiety is a teacher in disguise. It shows where the ego still clings. When you overthink, life mirrors that noise. But when you release, the universe quiets. The Sufi doesn't escape the mind, he retrains it to bow. He transforms what if into whatever you will. That surrender turns the storm of thoughts into the wind that carries him toward peace. In alignment, you stop praying for specific outcomes and start praying for inner harmony with Allah's will. This doesn't mean apathy. It means absolute trust. You still strive, but without the poison of fear. You plant your seeds with love, but your heart rests in patience. Ibn Arabi said, "To trust is to work as if everything depends on you, and to rest as if nothing does." That is divine balance. Most anxiety comes from rushing divine timing. You compare, compete, and collapse under the illusion of being behind. But in Allah's design, there is no behind, there is only right on time. The Sufi walks slower, yet reaches deeper. He moves with grace, not urgency, because he knows peace is not a destination, it's a state of alignment with the eternal now. When you align with Allah's decree, even pain becomes purposeful. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "Show me." Anxiety shrinks when curiosity replaces complaint. You realize every delay, loss, or detour carries a lesson written precisely for your evolution. Ibn Arabi said, "The lover sees mercy even in the breaking." Alignment is seeing divine wisdom where anxiety sees chaos. Alignment doesn't mean nothing hurts. It means pain no longer rules you. You feel deeply, but you don't drown. You cry, but you don't curse the rain. The Sufi walks through fire with grace because he knows who lit it. He trusts that even his scars are sacred reminders of a love that refines, not ruins. In that realization, anxiety loses its power completely. An anxious mind always lives in the future, but alignment anchors you in the present. Right here, right now, is where Allah's mercy operates. Ibn Arabi said, "The heart that surrenders time finds eternity in each breath." Anxiety cannot coexist with presence, because presence is remembrance, and remembrance is peace. That's why Sufis breathe slower, each inhale a surrender, each exhale a return. The shift from anxiety to alignment begins with gratitude. Gratitude dissolves the illusion of scarcity that fuels fear. When you thank Allah even during uncertainty, your heart aligns with His abundance. The Sufi thanks before he receives because gratitude itself opens the gates of provision. What the anxious chase, the grateful attract. Gratitude is the rhythm of divine alignment. In alignment, you stop trying to control people and outcomes. You focus on purifying your intention, not perfecting the result. You realize that anxiety fades when you give up the role of manager and return to being a servant. Ibn Arabi said, The heart at peace is the one that remembers its place. When you stop playing God, you finally meet Him in calm surrender. The more aligned you become, the quieter your mind grows. You no longer need to explain, prove, or force. Your trust speaks louder than your words. You live slower but with deeper awareness, seeing divine signs in everything. The wind, the silence, the delay. The anxious seek answers. The aligned recognize presence. That's the secret the Sufi carries in his calm. To move from anxiety to alignment is not a miracle, it's a return. A return to trust, to remembrance, to love. You stop chasing peace and start becoming it. The heart that once trembled now rests in the rhythm of La ilaha illallah. Nothing deserves control but Him. And in that moment, the shift is complete. You no longer fear the future because you're finally aligned with the one who writes it. The difference between faith and expectation. Expectation is attachment. Faith is surrender. One demands, the other trusts. Ibn Arabi said, expectation is the veil between you and peace. When you expect, you try to dictate how Allah should bless you. When you have faith, you trust that however He chooses is already perfect. Expectation argues with destiny. Faith bows to it. That's why the heart with faith sleeps in peace, even when nothing goes as planned. Most people mistake expectation for faith. They believe in Allah, but only as long as He fulfills their wishes. That's not trust, it's transaction. Faith, on the other hand, remains steady even when life contradicts desire. The Sufi doesn't say, I'll believe when I see. He says, I see because I believe. Expectation limits divine wisdom to your logic. Faith expands you to fit divine timing. Expectation is born from the ego. Faith is born from surrender. The ego prays to control. The believer prays to connect. Expectation says, I want this outcome. Faith says, I want what brings me closer to you. The first leads to disappointment. The second leads to serenity. Ibn Arabi wrote, expectation breeds heartbreak. Faith breeds unveiling. When you shift from wanting to trusting, peace follows naturally. When you live through expectation, your joy depends on results. When you live through faith, your joy depends on remembrance. Expectation chases the visible. Faith rests in the unseen. The Sufi knows that the unseen is not empty. It's where Allah's mercy is preparing what you cannot yet carry. The more you expect, the more you suffer. The more you trust, the more you see beauty in every outcome. Faith doesn't mean you stop dreaming, it means you stop demanding. You still make dua, but your heart stays humble, not entitled. You say, Ya Allah, if it's good for me, bring it. If not, remove my desire for it. Expectation makes you beg for one path. Faith allows Allah to show you a better one. Ibn Arabi said, faith is seeing Allah's hand even when He takes away. That is maturity of the soul. Expectation clings to form. Faith clings to meaning. The world sees failure when things fall apart, but faith sees redirection. Expectation cries over what's lost. Faith smiles knowing that Allah never subtracts without intention. The Sufi doesn't chase outcomes, he observes them. He knows that every disappointment is a disguised alignment, a door closed so the heart can be led elsewhere. People suffer because they expect Allah to follow their plans instead of aligning to His. They treat dua like a command, not a conversation. But faith whispers, even if He doesn't give me what I ask, He'll give me what I need. Ibn Arabi said, expectation is blindness that calls itself sight. Faith removes that blindness, it teaches you to trust even the shadows. Expectation comes from impatience. You set a timeline for Allah, and when He delays, your hope collapses. Faith, however, sees delay as dialogue. It believes that Allah's silence speaks, perhaps saying, not yet, my servant, I'm still preparing you. The Sufi smiles through waiting because he knows that divine love never forgets, it only refines. The difference between faith and expectation is the difference between peace and pain. Expectation chains you to results. Faith frees you to live. When you expect, every no feels like rejection. When you have faith, every no feels like protection. Ibn Arabi said, faith doesn't chase answers, it recognizes mercy. To live that truth is to finally rest inside divine wisdom. Expectation turns worship into a bargain. Faith turns it into love. The one who expects praise for outcomes. The one with faith prays for alignment. Expectation asks for ease. Faith asks for strength. Expectation wants the story to change. Faith wants to see Allah in every chapter. The Sufi doesn't say, "Why me?" He says, "With you I can bear anything." That's faith beyond conditions. When you expect, your love becomes conditional. I'll be grateful when things go my way. Faith has no such limits. It worships through both the sunlight and the storm. Ibn Arabi wrote, "Expectation worships the gift. Faith worships the giver." When you love Allah for who He is, not what He gives, you transcend disappointment. You realize that His wisdom is the answer, not the obstacle. Expectation thrives on illusion, the illusion that you know what's best for you, but you don't see the full picture. You want the rose, unaware of the thorns that come with it. Faith is the humility to say, "You know, my Lord, and I do not." The Sufi understands that even pain can be a form of mercy, and that trusting Allah's plan is safer than fulfilling his own desire. The heart of expectation is fear, fear of loss, delay, or rejection. The heart of faith is love, love that sees Allah's decree as care, not cruelty. Expectation creates anxiety, faith creates calm. Ibn Arabi said, "The one who trusts never mourns what passes him, because he knows that what's meant to be his will arrive exactly when it should, not a second sooner or later." Faith gives you roots in every storm. You may not know where life is taking you, but you know who is guiding you. Expectation makes you question Allah. Faith makes you question yourself. Expectation says, "I deserve this." Faith says, "He knows what I deserve." The more you live by faith, the less you fight reality, because reality itself becomes sacred. At the end, expectation dies in disappointment. Faith rises in peace. The Sufi walks lightly, unattached to outcome, because his heart already rests in the source. He no longer says, "I hope this happens, but I trust whatever happens." That's the secret Ibn Arabi left behind, that the difference between faith and expectation is the difference between knowing Allah and merely believing in Him. Living the verse, what "He is sufficient" really means. To say He is sufficient is not poetry, it's power. Ibn Arabi said, "Sufficiency is the heart's recognition that nothing adds or removes what Allah has decreed." When you truly live this verse, you stop negotiating with destiny. You no longer measure peace by possession or success. Sufficiency means knowing that everything borrowed from the world eventually returns to Him, and yet you lose nothing, because the source remains. Most people recite this verse but live as if the world sustains them. They chase validation, wealth, and love, hoping these things will secure them. But the one who knows Allah as sufficient sees that dependence on creation is a form of quiet slavery. Ibn Arabi taught that tawakkul without realization is lip service. Realization is when you no longer panic over provision, because the provider never forgets. To live this verse is to rest in divine adequacy. You work, but you don't beg outcomes. You plan, but you don't cling. Your heart whispers, "Whatever leaves me cannot harm me, for my sufficiency is intact." The Sufi walks lightly because his reliance is not on the scene. He trusts that what is meant for him will find him even in stillness, for it was written long before his worry existed. When Allah is sufficient, scarcity becomes an illusion. You realize that nothing external can complete what Allah already filled within you. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Richness is not having many possessions, but being content with what Allah gives." Ibn Arabi built upon this truth. The one who finds sufficiency in Allah never feels poor, even when his hands are empty. His wealth is certainty, not coins. True sufficiency dismantles fear. Fear of loss, fear of the future, fear of what others think all fade when your heart knows who sustains it. You stop over-explaining, overworking, overthinking, because you finally see that outcomes belong to the unseen. The Sufi doesn't chase applause, he chases alignment. For him, peace isn't found in control, but in surrender to divine provision. He is sufficient is not a comfort for the weak, it is the armor of the aware. It's the mindset of those who see Allah's hand behind every rise and fall. When the world withdraws, they don't collapse. They return inward to the source that never leaves. Ibn Arabi said, Sufficiency is not to own the world, but to be free from needing it. That's why the Sufi smiles when others fear scarcity. He sees abundance in surrender. Living this verse means seeing Allah's signature in every event. A rejection is protection. A loss is redirection. A delay is preparation. When Allah removes something, He's not punishing. He's replacing the temporary with the eternal. The one who trusts this truth no longer calls anything bad. He says, if it came by His will. If it left by His mercy. That is sufficiency. The modern heart suffers because it replaces Allah is sufficient with, I must manage everything. That false burden crushes the spirit. The Sufi removes it by remembering that nothing happens to him. Everything happens through Allah. Ibn Arabi taught that sufficiency isn't an escape from effort, but freedom from anxiety during effort. You do what you can, and trust the rest to Him. That's real peace. To live this verse is to be unshaken by outcomes. You can fail publicly and still feel complete privately, because your worth isn't attached to success. You can lose people and still love deeply, because your source of love never runs dry. Ibn Arabi said, when you discover sufficiency, even heartbreak feeds your soul, because the pain reminds you where your home is. He is sufficient also means you no longer fear tomorrow. You stop rehearsing tragedy in your mind because you know Allah will meet you in every moment with new mercy. The Sufi sees the future not as threat, but as unfolding wisdom. What looks uncertain to the anxious appears perfect to the trusting. Sufficiency is not knowing the plan, it's knowing the planner. When your heart accepts Allah as sufficient, gratitude deepens. You start thanking Him not only for what arrives, but for what's withheld. You see how every unanswered prayer guarded you from harm. Ibn Arabi said, to those who trust, Allah's no is sweeter than His yes, for both carry Him. That realization turns disappointment into worship. Living this verse reshapes how you relate to people. You stop expecting them to complete you, fix you, or validate you. You give love freely but without dependence. Because when Allah is your anchor, no storm can uproot you. The Sufi doesn't isolate from people, he interacts through love, not need. That's the difference between connection and attachment. Sufficiency brings dignity. You stop begging for recognition because you're already seen by the one who never overlooks. You stop fearing abandonment because the one who wrote your story is still writing. Ibn Arabi said, the one who knows Allah as enough is never humiliated by delay nor flattered by gain. He walks through life calm, grounded, and inwardly wealthy. This verse, when lived, dissolves comparison. You no longer measure your worth against anyone else's blessings. You stop saying, why not me? Because you understand divine timing. You realize that Allah's portion for you cannot miss you, and what misses you was never yours. That realization ends envy and births peace, the kind of peace that no fortune or fame can buy. In the end, to say He is sufficient is to live as if you have already arrived. It's the heart's declaration that nothing external defines your security, joy, or worth. The Sufi wakes each morning saying, if I have Allah, I lack nothing. And truly, that's the secret Ibn Arabi left for all seekers. When Allah becomes your sufficiency, the entire universe becomes your servant, and your soul finally rests. Every problem ends not when it disappears, but when you realize it was never yours to solve. Allah doesn't ask you to understand His plan. He asks you to trust it. Ibn Arabi taught that true peace comes when you no longer fight the flow of destiny but recognize who writes it. The one who recites this verse not just with their tongue but with their heart will feel the entire world bow to calm. And whoever puts his trust in Allah, He is sufficient for him. That is not a verse, it's a doorway. Step through it, and you'll never be broken the same way again.